And we are live with the illustrious, amazing Chase Hughes. How are you doing today?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I wanted to bring you back, obviously, because I love having the behavior panel on anyway, but this is sort of significant. In 2 days, this show is a year old.
Yeah.
And really, I know I've talked about it before, but I've had a few other people subscribe and things like that, so they may not have heard. But you're the main reason that I actually have this show at all. I don't know if you remember, but back in what was it, last November, I think it was, you called me. I was actually in Disney and you said, "Hey, I want to do some video interviews."
Yeah. I said, let's get together and have a bottle of wine and do a video podcast that way.
Okay. Well, I wasn't doing video podcasts. And I told
I
you, I'm
know.
like, dude, I'm not a video guy. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, let's have some wine. We'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but we did it and it was great. I had a great time.
oh yeah, it was fantastic. I did it in January because it's an ironic situation. You and I live in the same area. But I'm sure you'll be the first to admit that actually getting together to do something adds like an extra hour each way and everything else. So it's just almost easier to just let's go online. And then if we try this whole live streaming thing, we could have people in the chat.
Yeah. Which is a lot cooler. We get some people that are able to interact and ask questions.
Exactly. And so now here we are a year later. When I did that first episode with you, I had, I think, 72 subscribers because I had the channel. It's just I wasn't doing anything. I just, dumped audiograms on there or whatever. And now I have 13,820 something.
Man, that's great.
I've grown a little bit. So it's really, really fantastic. I see the Dragon's Treasure is in here. Wanted to bring him up. He's got a sale going on actually right now, and I'm actually in my fancy vessel here drinking tea of all things. And I have something going with the Dragon's Treasure, the dragonstreasure.com, where if you guys want to buy tea, you get 10% off. And it's not like straight tea, it's like the fiddly tea, English tea, all the fancy stuff, the different. Well, it's much fancier than I even know how to comprehend, but it's pretty cool stuff. So everybody check that out. Now, bringing you back today, our last time we talked, I ended with, what are we going to talk about next time?
Yeah.
And you promised, you said, how to have unstoppable discipline. So take us on a journey. How do we have unstoppable discipline?
Well, I think the whole concept of discipline is something that I started looking at in, 1999. And it was fascinating to me just trying to understand what that was. Mm-hmm. And I think that we tend to view discipline as willpower, and those things are the same. And I think there's a very different thing, that I'm not exerting discipline the same way I would be willpower.
And what's the difference?
Well, the way I define discipline is the ability to prioritize the benefit of your future self ahead of the enjoyment of your present self. So in reality, what that would mean is, if you go back, think of all the times you were pissed off at your past tense self. So like you stayed up late drinking too much, or you decided to gaff an assignment off or a task at work, and then you waited till the last minute, or you didn't pay a bill on time, or you spent money on something stupid and then, regretted it a few weeks later. So many of our problems, even smoking or overeating, comes from an inability in the moment to prioritize your future self. And I think that once we get into just a small process of discipline, even just starting off discipline, is to start thinking as much as you can of your future self instead of your now self. And there's a ton of stuff you can do. You can go download, I think it's a free app, but there's an app that will make you look 90 to 95 years old. You can take a selfie and then it'll do something where it'll make you look really old. And what if you printed that out and stuck it on your refrigerator? Not just for what you eat or anything like that, but to keep your brain focused on that you're going to be out there in the future. There is a future you out there that you're responsible for taking care of. And in reality, it can start small. And it becomes, once it gets a little bit of momentum, it turns into a snowball, because I think it's a very addictive process. So one night, just tonight when you're going to bed, get the coffee ready for yourself. Put the cup where it needs to be, pick up the kitchen, sacrifice now for the future self. And it sounds so simplistic, but you're doing it for another person. And if it wasn't another person, we wouldn't be upset at our past tense self. We'd be upset with ourselves. So we kind of think in terms of those three. There's a future, there's a now, and there's a past. And that's, I think, the single element. So small things, laying out your clothes beforehand, putting something out for yourself, leaving that and starting getting into these tiny steps, everything you can think of, small little things for yourself tomorrow or a week from now. And just doing that as often as you possibly can. Put a $20 bill in a pocket of a shirt you're not going to wear for a month and a half, because you're going to forget about it, and then you'll be grateful. Because that's where the ultimate part of discipline is, when you're feeling lots of gratitude towards your past tense self. So instead of being upset at the past tense self, I'm feeling grateful for the past tense self.
That reminds me, I'm a lapsed runner at the moment. Eventually I'll get back into it. But one of the, I don't know if I'd call it a trick, or I guess very much in line with that, is people who would run in the morning. Running in the morning is a big pain in the ass, and you don't always feel like getting out and running. So they deliberately would do just what you said, but it would be like literally the whole running clothes would be all set out. The shoes would be right there. So as soon as they get up there, it's just right there in their face, and they'd almost make a deal with themselves. So everything would be out for them. They had to put it on. And the rule is simply this: they had to go out the door with their running clothes on and to the mailbox. Now, if they decided at that point, you know what, never mind, I'm just not up for it, I'm not going to do it, then okay, fine, they can go back in the house. But 99.9% of the time, it was like, well, I'm already out here. So is that kind of in line with what you're talking about?
I think so. And I think in that regard, it's not really concern for your future self. You're putting that out to make your future self more likely to do something, which is still fine. But I think they might have different intent behind each one of those things. So for me, I might lay out the running clothes because I don't like looking for them. And if there's something I don't like doing in the mornings, I'll do it the night before, or I'll set up as much as I possibly can the night before for future me. So in reality, so if this is you right now, I'm looking forward with concern. I'm looking backwards with gratitude. Okay. And in the present, I might be making a sacrifice, which is fine, because my priority is me later, not me now. But the big part of that is to force your thinking into that frame of mind. So here's the number one thing that you can do here is to bring that into your mind, is constantly remind yourself at all times. So put up sticky notes. Is this decision going to benefit me later? Am I thinking about my future self? I'm going to put those pictures up around the house of me looking way older from the app I downloaded. I'm going to do as much as I can to change my thought process. Because if you think about this, people who overeat, people who use drugs, people who stay up too late, people who have bad habits, people who smoke, people who do any habit that you don't want to do, is prioritizing your present self. So all of these bad habits that we're thinking of, that we would go to a therapist sometimes to fix, is putting priority on you now instead of you in the future. So a lot of our issues, like 90% of our issues, I am failing to get the mindset of caring about future self more than present self. So that's so much of our issues at work, at our social lives, in our families, and our friendships, when we're maintaining relationships, especially now when everything's on a screen. And if we think about that, fixing the way that we're viewing our present self and looking forward, I'm always thinking about me in the future. I'm more concerned with that person than everything else. Fixing the overeating or fixing the, I don't want to get up in the morning, I don't want to go to the gym. Fixing all of that stuff is a byproduct. It happens as a byproduct of shifting my mindset to thinking about future me and prioritizing me in the future.
Okay, out of curiosity, here's a question that came in. Do you think that our level of natural discipline is predetermined at birth?
No,
okay.
not whatsoever.
So you're definitely into nurture over nature in that regard? With
discipline, yes. Okay. Because I think you can cultivate discipline. And I've never met anybody that was really born with it. But I will say that there are people who are born with the ability to sacrifice in the present for the future. And if you think about it, you look back to your high school, your middle school, elementary school, all your friends who went to medical school, all the friends who left high school and became a doctor, a lawyer, and were really successful. If you look back into high school when everybody else went and partied, they might still show up, but they're going to be late because they got their crap done before the party instead of after the party. So they had that ability back then. And I'm not sure if we're born with it or if we're born with a certain level of it, but I think everybody can reach a pretty high level of discipline. But those people that are successful later in life have that ability. And there's even been studies done. I think this was at the University of Connecticut. There's another one done at some Hampton University that had Hampton in the name. But they studied these kids from second grade until they were 40. Harvard also did another one, which is the longest running study of its kind. And they found that the number one thing that all of the ones who were successful had in common as children was the ability to delay gratification. And I thought that was an incredible thing. And if we're cultivating discipline or forcing discipline on ourselves, try these tiny little self-deprivations. Like if I usually take sugar in my coffee, cut it off for a day. Prove to yourself that you are in charge. So get that back and start proving to yourself that you can exert control. Even if it's those really small things and small steps, that's the self-deprivations are the way to start proving that to yourself, because our minds operate off of proof. Somebody tells us something, we're wondering if there's evidence for it. We're wondering if even when people suffer from a lack of confidence, they're waiting for proof from their outside environment before they act a certain way. Instead of giving themselves permission, they're waiting for the environment to do so. So that's one way we can trick our primitive brain into having more discipline, is to putting those things together in little piecemeal fashion, those little small self-deprivations to prove it to yourself that you are in control.
Those self-deprivations almost seem like the opposite philosophy of the participation trophy lifestyle that we're in at the moment.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. I think we're going to be with that lifestyle for a long time.
Dr. Wood, who's a previous guest we've had on, is saying that we are our DNA plus experiences.
Yeah, that's beautifully said.
So, okay. I actually have a question that came in over locals. I have a locals page now, and I put out so there can be questions asked ahead of time for people who might not make it. And it's from Gavin Stone. I know you know Gavin Stone.
You bet.
And he's saying, could you please tell him I took his advice and bought a journal and I suck at it? So what would you recommend to Gavin, the non-journalist?
The non-journalist. So I have it over here. I have probably a 2.5, 3 foot stack of journals from the last 10 years or so. And I think journaling is the steering wheel of your life. And I I honestly believe everyone that I've talked to that's ever done it, that getting control over your behaviors and your habits, journaling is one of the best ways to do it. And I keep a journal that's not like, here's what I did today, or a Dear Diary kind of thing. I read a book. Every valuable piece of information I get out of a book goes into that journal. And if I'm in a phone call, the notes from that call go into that journal with a date. But I also use the journal on a daily basis to track, my personal behavior. Did I get out of bed on time? Just like I keep a chart, just like a kindergartner, like where they change their card from green to yellow if they do something silly in the class. I do that to myself regularly. Did I get out of bed on time? And I keep track. And I think the awareness of whether or not I'm failing in a certain area and tracking that stuff is almost all you need. You don't really need to make some giant course correction. The awareness alone is often enough to push us over the edge to get us starting to move in the right direction. Just to make that 1 degree course change that's going to make a difference 6 months from now.
Like a nudge?
Yep, that's it. And I think the nudge happens as a byproduct. I use that word a bunch tonight. But the nudge and the change in your behavior is a byproduct of your awareness of the patterns that you've started to exhibit.
Okay, the journals, I'm curious about something, though. I would worry about, you mentioned there's stacks and stacks of the journals. Is it the act itself of keeping the journal that, for example, I know that if you take notes, it's been shown a lot by writing and physically writing, not typing, but actually physically writing the notes. It will help you retain information better sometimes because you're having to listen, interpret, and then write it down in a different medium. So you're kind of revisiting the subject multiple times. Are these journals, especially when they're copious, are they something you go back to and tabulate, or is it just the act of taking the journal itself and you're not necessarily going back through everything you did in the past? It's just kind of sort of your way of documenting as you go and reinforcing.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And I think the journal itself is, I don't go back and look at my little ratings of myself at the end of the day, but I do go back and read all of my notes. I'm watching I don't know, this morning I watched a Bob Proctor YouTube video and took maybe a paragraph of notes out of an hour-long video. But yeah, so in a week or two, I'll probably go back and really dissect what I got out of that video. And I think writing it does help, but I think revisiting it makes it twice as helpful, or it does for me.
Okay. And are these thinner notes like distilling it? Like in a way, because when you revisit it, I'm guessing, I don't know about you, but I'll forget it in an hour. So I didn't know if those notes are like your takeaways and say, okay. And then the reinforcement of them a week later maybe locks it into longer term memory.
I think so. And I revisit mine pretty regularly. So I think that's something that really can help. And a journal, there's no wrong way to do it. I have mine designed in 3 sections. I have one that's like planning. So I have little calendar stuff in there. The meat of the whole thing, most of the blank pages in there are just for regular notes. I'm reading a book or an article, or I'm taking notes on a phone call. I'm making a list, things like that. And then the back section is going to be for serious key takeaways from books, serious key takeaways. So I take them from another section, put them in there, and then goals and setting goals. And that's all going to be in the back section. That's just how I do it.
Okay. And speaking of notes and paying attention to everything, I have a comment here, which is interesting. I definitely want to address. I wish Eric would pay attention to Chase when he's talking and look at questions coming in after. And I can appreciate that, but there's this small problem that I am kind of trying to attend not only to the conversation with Chase, but also the chat here on the side, things that are coming in. And while I would love to be hanging out, this is sort of a job to me. And I do need to be considerate of my audience, who I love you to death, Chase, but my audience is a little more important in the greater scheme of things.
I get it. The whole reason you're able to see that is because you were reading through those.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks for, yeah, there's the irony. And then here we go. How do you deal with the negative self-talk that says you will not succeed?
And I know Rory, actually.
Cool.
I think on a regular basis, I went through this for 15 years and probably some change, and I still do. I think it never really goes away. I think that on a very regular basis, we're doing something to change our, I don't want to say frequency because I know people will freak out about it, but we're changing our vibration. We're changing, let's say we're changing the quality of our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get into the law of attraction, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. I can sum up the law of attraction in 4 words, just 4 words. And that is responsibility for your thoughts. So if there's ever a time when something's coming in that's negative, we obviously want to change that. So if I'm brainwashing a person or brainwashing myself, I'm going to do the same thing. It's a 4-step, brainwashing is a 4-step process. I wrote this process for people, and it follows a 4-step formula. It's focus, emotional involvement, agitation, and repetition.
Fear.
Yeah, it spells out fear. And that exact model is the best way to do that. So I'm changing what I'm focusing on. I'm making sure that I'm emotionally involved in it because my limbic system that makes all of my decisions doesn't speak English. So an affirmation is useless unless there's some kind of emotion or feeling attached to it. And we're actually feeling what that means. So an affirmation would work even if it was in a sound that had no verbal meaning to us at all, no syntax, as long as it produced an emotion, because the emotions and the sensory experiences is how we make most of our decisions. And we see somebody walking out of a Best Buy with a big ass TV that they just bought. If you stopped them and said, "Hey, why are you buying this TV?" They're going to give you like, "Oh, well, it has this dimension and then these megapixel." I don't know anything about electronics. But in reality, no one's ever going to say, "I was influenced by advertising. I was emotionally influenced by my neighbor who got one that was 3 inches smaller and I wanted to get one that was bigger." Nobody's going to say that. So the emotional brain, the mammalian brain, its job is to make most of our decisions. And our human brain, which sits on top, the neocortex, takes the credit and then legitimizes why it made the decision.
Well, and that's been said, right? I mean, we make our decisions, then we go through our justifications.
Yeah.
Pretty much universally, right? And
so let me say one more thing about this negative thought patterns here. I have a brain back here, but you can't see it. So if you're watching this video right now and you stick your fingers in your ears, that is our mammalian brain.
Here we go.
Right here. So right here, my screen's backwards. It's hard. So right in this area is our mammalian brain. So our brain kind of started out developing in layers, and I'll skip over all that stuff. But that part of the brain right there doesn't speak English. So here's what you need to do. If we have something going on that's causing this panic attack or anything like that, causing fear or negative beliefs, we need to understand neurology. And this sounds so nerdy, but let me unpack it. The neurology is a brain that is millions of years old, mm-hmm. that hasn't changed. It hasn't really evolved or changed from when we were getting attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. So what it's trying to do, that brain has not changed since it was protecting you from a saber-toothed tiger. So now when anything causes stress in this modern day world, even if it's on the screen of your iPhone, the brain doesn't know the difference. It's still a mammal that's 1 million years old. So what it's trying to do is protect you from a saber-toothed tiger or falling off a cliff or a rattlesnake. That's what it's trying to do. So one thing that might help you a whole lot when any of those things start coming in is just to say the phrase, there are no tigers. So on one hand, we're calming down that brain just a little bit, but we're reminding ourselves that that is a 1,000,000-year-old animal that is not trying to sabotage us. It's there to try to keep you safe, but we need to address it and speak to it like a kid, like a 1,000,000-year-old animal. Like, I appreciate the help. I'm not in danger here. I'm not going to die. And I'm going to just change what I'm thinking about as fast as I can.
And on that note, Dr. Wood is saying the beauty of being DNA plus experiences is that everything we do changes us and everyone we interact with. Kind of continuing on that earlier and with what you're talking about here now. And then this coincides very much with what you were saying about putting off for tomorrow. The chief cause of failure and unhappiness is trading what you want most for what you want now.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, that was Zig Ziglar. Fabulous quote.
I've
never read that before.
It kind of fits in almost exactly with what you were saying.
It really does.
All right. Let me check a couple more questions in here. So on the discipline path, now you've been putting this into action. I think you were saying you're up at 4 a.m. every day writing.
I write every 7 days a week from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Okay. And what made you prioritize into the writing, or have you always? Because I feel like you've kind of shifted more and more into the writing, especially fiction. What caused that change in you? I mean, is it external influences or something you always wanted?
Well, I've done 9 deployments, and still learning how to write fiction is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I need peace and quiet to write. So I have to get up at 4 a.m. if I'm going to have anything remotely resembling that. But that's like the golden sacred hour for me. It just happens to be when my brain works the best. And I want all of my hardcore creative stuff front loaded in the front of the day. And again, that's just me. I don't pretend to have some kind of formula that's magic. But that works for me. And waking up at 4 a.m., I know I'm up before 99% of the people on the East Coast, Eastern Seaboard of the United States. And that feels good. That feels really good.
Of course, the West Coast, and they might still be up. Going the other way.
No doubt.
So what, not to harp on that, but when did you start to kind of shift into the fiction? I mean, is that giving you joy? You said it's the hardest thing you've ever done. Is that fulfilling you because it's the hardest thing you've ever done? It's
extremely fulfilling. Except for the editing process. So I'm paying editors to tell me I'm an idiot. Okay. A lot of times, they go through and I open the Word doc in the morning and there's 16,000 comments that I've got to go through. And that's my morning, during the editing phase, which I'm going through right now. Mm. And that is a burden and a benefit at the same time, because you have somebody there to help you along the way. And you also really have to struggle when there's, on one hand, there's, hey, we need to say this a bit different. Or I get a comment that says, hey, you can just delete this chapter. The whole chapter that you spent, like I'll spend 3 weeks sometimes writing 2 sentences in the book. Mm. And then, I'll get that, formed into a chapter, and I'll get a comment that says, hey, you just need to delete this. And then I'll get comments that I don't even understand at all. And they'll say, hey, the antecedent of this pronoun is unclear. I have no idea what that actually means. I've got that this morning.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So on that, I was curious because you also do nonfiction too. So let's say you get the dreaded quote writer's block. Do you go in and write your shopping list just to be spitting something out? Or do you say, okay, I'm going to change gears and let me write an article on something right now because those damn 2 sentences aren't coming?
Yeah. So whatever does feel cool to me, like not just cool, but like whatever's inspiring to me. And in my words, I would just say whatever feels cool to write about. I'll switch over to that immediately. Not even I won't experience writer's block for more than 5 seconds because I'll completely switch to something else. I use an app called Microsoft OneNote to write 100% of everything that I write. And I'll say, oh, this isn't working. I'm going to open this other folder called whatever, mind control, or, whatever it is.
Okay. And your books and your nonfiction and fiction definitely overlap quite a lot.
They do.
What do you outline your project? Do you just write into the project? So, I mean, I guess essentially when you're coming up with a book or a story, do you know what happened at the end and you're filling it in between, or are you discovering as you go what's going on with you?
There's a little of both. So the book Phrase 7, I thought the title was so badass. I came up with the title before I even knew what it was and started writing the book. So I wrote the book around the title. And my newest book called The Belgrade Archer, which is like a sequel book. That book, I basically wrote the entire book in 4 paragraphs. And then I continuously I guess the 4 paragraphs are kind of like an outline, but I just reference back to that the entire time. So there's never really an outline, so to speak. And I have no idea how the book's going to end until I get to the end.
Okay. So it is a bit of a hybrid. And also, did you see this as a series, or did you say, let me write a book, and then suddenly it became a sequel?
I had no idea people would like it. I thought people were going to hate it.
Well, what if you did?
Before I published it, I researched how quickly I could yank it off of Amazon in case it was embarrassingly bad. Yeah. I didn't think people would like it at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you did some beta testing, right? I mean, you spent it
with my clients, like people who like my kind of crap. So I didn't know, like, Aunt Donna, who lives in wherever, is going to be buying it and having it on the beach somewhere. I didn't know if she was going to like it.
Okay. Okay. So what inspires you in terms of it? I mean, many fiction writers are also fiction fans. Who do you read? Who do you look up to?
I think my favorite writers would be David Baldacci, Dan Brown, and number 1 would be John Grisham, for sure.
Okay. And you kind of have you're going sort of for the Dan Brown pace or more similar in that regard, right?
Pretty similar to Dan Brown, or maybe a Tom Clancy. Probably be very inspirational to me.
But less technical. Clancy gets pretty deep.
Yeah, I read one book. He spent 6 pages describing the interior of a radio communications room.
Yeah,
and I think I might have put the book down at that point. I don't remember.
Well, he also has a research team.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, Tom Clancy's like Patterson. One, he's dead, but even before then, he's almost, I would say, a publisher over an author anymore.
I think, a lot of guys are going that way.
Patterson,
a franchise, the name, and there's one of my favorite authors, Vince Flynn, who writes a series called the Mitch Rapp series.
Yeah, he died.
Yeah, he died, and he's still publishing books. It's like authors are not allowed to die anymore. Their name is so valuable, they can't die.
Actually, that's fun though, because Robert Ludlum has published more books since his death than when he was alive.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, by far. Oh yeah, the numbers aren't even comparable. But my favorite case of this is Lee Child, who writes Jack Reacher. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He retired. He said, I'm done. My son's taking over. And I just could not help but think, because like Robert B. Parker is one of my favorite authors. He died literally writing. I mean, he dropped dead, heart attack on the on his typewriter. So he died in the saddle. But I just love the idea of Lee Child saying, okay, I did this, created this massive series, did all that, and I'm done. I'm going to give it to my son. He'll continue writing on, and I'm just going to enjoy the fruits of my labor and just chill out. So there's something beautiful.
They're franchising. It's great.
So what is Chase planning to do? Are you planning to franchise? I know you're talking to people, I think, in Hollywood. Can you go into any of that?
Yeah, we're talking to some people. We've got some hardcore offers to do a television series for the new books, based on the new books, the fiction books.
Okay. All right. So to jump back to a subject matter you hear, what neuroscience books would you recommend for a beginner?
Neuroscience books. I've never read a neuroscience book that wasn't a textbook. So I may not be a good source, but I can tell you my favorite YouTube video of all time was a neuroscientist being interviewed on the Rick Roll podcast. And it's called Hack Your Behavior. It is the best ever. And if you're wanting to learn neuroscience, the number one video I recommend to everybody is called Neuroanatomy Made Ridiculously Simple. It's an hour-long video, but it's of a doctor talking about neuroanatomy and how everything works together in the brain. I think it's pretty cool.
And does that go into the lizard brain, etc.?
Yes. They talk about it. And it's just a theory. It's a triune brain theory is what that's called.
Made ridiculously simple?
Yeah.
I'd remember to put this in the show notes. No.
I didn't realize until just now I can see comments over here.
Yeah, there you go.
I had it clicked on private chat.
Oh, what's this? Eric, don't scare him. Why would I? I'm not going to scare Chase. Trust me.
Eric's a scary guy.
Yeah, sure. And what is the subject of the painting that's Yorktown behind you, right?
Yes. So this is called The Surrender of Lord Cornwallis, the painting. It's got the, I can't point because this camera is reversed. So it's got the French on one side, the Americans on one side. And this is the representative of Lord Cornwallis handing a saber over to the Americans. But the painting is a central piece of the Phrase 7 book. So now I bought one, and now it's behind my desk.
I've noticed that you tend to talk about Yorktown quite a bit in obscure references. Why? What is your fascination with it? It seems like Yorktown has a real magnetism to you.
It does. I first went to Yorktown when I'm doing a little research for the book, and within 5 minutes, I thought, man, everything needs to be centered around Yorktown, Virginia. And if you read Phrase 7, this secret agency is based there in Yorktown. Keep in mind, it is a fiction book. So the secret agency is based there in Yorktown. And the reason that they're based in Yorktown in present day is based on this painting behind me. And that's why I keep going back there, because I keep having to write about it, for one. But I also love Yorktown, the feeling of it.
So you go there. I mean, it's fun in history. I don't know if the audience is familiar with it. You go out there. I don't know what it's like now with COVID, but they would have reenactments of the battles and people dressed in period garb and things of that sort. Kind of like Williamsburg. It's sort of that colonial parkway trail, if you will. All these things tied together. Speaking of which,
so we're both reading through comments now. Now that I can bring it up on the screen, I can't stop looking at them. I'm reading Mary Grace Kirby, perhaps, maybe so.
Who, what?
She said maybe it's a past.
Oh, were you in a past life?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me see. Okay, somebody asked a previous question and I missed it, Eva, I guess. Are you aware of the work on growth mindset of Stanford neurologist Andrew Huberman?
Yes. And the YouTube video that I said was my favorite on the entirety of YouTube was Andrew Huberman. Yes. So he is a badass. I really like that guy. And I think his message is great, but not just that, how he can communicate the nerdiest, like super dry professor kind of neurology stuff to everyday people and still make it captivating and interesting. I think that was one of the things that really pulled me into that video. Victoria, thanks for getting the book.
I was just going to bring that up. Okay, we're going to go nuts here. This is why with guests, I forget to mention that there's a chat on the side. All right, what do you think about Freemasons? Will it be in your book?
I don't know. Freemasons are a pretty cool organization. I think they're older than Christianity, if I'm correct. I think they date back to King Solomon. And Christianity didn't come around until technically around 300 AD when the Bible came out.
Oh, okay. I guess
the Bible wasn't written until 300 years after everything.
Right. And then you had the conclave. I forget when that was, where they made the determination about whether Mary was a virgin and all that stuff. But
yeah,
now we're digging into Dan Brown.
Yeah, the Council of Nicaea.
Okay, so on the flip side, we asked you about fiction. What about behavioral science? I mean, I know that you talk about being in Hawaii stationed and almost like you were kind of influenced by the Pickup Society a little bit, but who did you start with in studying mind control, behavior, whatever? And how about you just tell us who you'd recommend still to this day, not necessarily who not to read?
As far as mind control specifically?
Well, okay. First off, I have trouble putting you into a box because you're kind of a mix. You do body language, negotiation, interrogation.
I think it's all one art form.
Okay, so you agree with me that it's all in a spectrum.
Yeah.
And it all goes together. Okay. So we'll just say behavioral engineering as a whole.
Sure.
Is that how you'd lay it down, or social engineering as part of it? I don't know which way you'd go.
Yeah. Either, I don't care. It's just syntax.
Okay. Is that a macro thing, possibly? Like social, wider, behavioral, or what? One's wider, one's narrower. What?
I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I just say behavioral engineering most of the time.
Okay, these are the kinds of things that I want to think about over a beer or a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And break it down.
It'd be easier to do that with a bottle of wine.
For sure.
I think, one of the people that I studied under, he is a clinical hypnotherapist, but he also wrote books about mind control using hypnosis, and his name is Dantalian Jones. And I can't remember how long it's been since his book was published, but I think his book's called Mind Control 101. That's literally the title of his book. He's a great guy, and he's been a mentor to me for quite some time. Dantalian Jones.
Really? And Scott Rouse had to pipe in. Tan Daddy has mastered many skills.
That is correct.
And so, which actually sounds almost like Dantalian, which is a very interesting wordplay. But what is the history of Tan Daddy?
So just a couple days ago, we recorded a behavior panel episode, and we bullshit for 30 minutes or 45 minutes before we even start recording. So we're all just hanging out, talking, and Scott will take whatever he chooses is, his favorite 12-second clip to throw in as like the intro part of that discussion. And we were talking about what is the kind of the creepiest comments that we've gotten on YouTube. And I said, I've gotten proposed to in a YouTube comment. And Another comment I got from a guy in one of our YouTube videos is said just Chase Tan Daddy was the comment. So that became the entire intro to our latest YouTube video.
Love it. Okay, so now it's gonna meme. You can have a cup and or t-shirt. I mean, you got what you got, Chase. So
That
be
needs to
what
be
you got.
I think we should change my name on the
Tan
show.
Daddy. Well, you could do it right now, huh? Tan Daddy. It'd be what you got, Tan Daddy. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about a little bit behind the scenes. Who is the biggest instigator out of the bunch?
Oh, it's Scott. 100%.
So you'd say Scott's the devil?
Yeah, well, Scott and I are both do that stuff. We do both poke a whole lot. But we all three of us gang up on Mark. So Mark will join the Zoom meeting after. So me, Greg, and Scott will all be sitting there, and then Mark will join the waiting room and wait for Scott to add him in. And then every time Mark joins, we'll do something ridiculous. All three of us. So sometimes, we'll be just talking about something completely random or inappropriate. And other times we'll just all three pretend like we're frozen. And something's wrong with Mark's computer. So we do that every time that we all get on to record an episode.
And of course, Mark's reaction probably is more entertaining than what you're doing.
Yeah.
If I know Mark.
Every time. And so Mark now, when he logs into Zoom, he's just waiting for something to happen now.
So who's the adult in the room? Greg?
Oh yeah. Greg's the bring everybody back to reality guy for the group.
All right. On this note, Eva, do you analyze each other on the behavior panel? And how would you stop yourself from doing it if you don't want to do it?
I think a lot of people think that we've got this stuff turned on 24/7. And I see more than most people. So I might notice your blink rate or your breathing rate unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it shifts, I might be conscious of it. But I don't consciously do any of that stuff anymore. So reading people is not something I ever turn off. I just happen to choose friends that are just really genuine people. So my need to turn on the reading people mode never exists. So that never really comes on. I have genuine girlfriend. I have genuine friends. I have the genuine guys on the behavior panel that never really becomes an issue. So I don't think I've ever caught myself reading them, except for watching Greg react to videos and stuff.
Oh, come on now. I know you're reading Scott saying, what's he going to do? What's he got planned? I know there's got to be a little bit of that with your little pens and cups and T-shirts. And
Charlie had a good question there. Yes, I have, but they were.
I love that.
They were in the Middle East.
Wait. Oh, must have been a different question. Sorry. David Miscavige, body language. What do you think of him? He's the guy who runs Scientology, if you're not familiar.
I haven't seen him. I don't know much about him at all.
Okay. Have you looked? Okay. You're in line with a lot of that. Have you looked into cults at all?
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So actually, this is almost a segue. And if folks are patient about it, I appreciate it. Wait. Oh, is this the question you answered? Have you ever met a serial killer or mass murderer?
Yeah. Yes, I have, but they were in the Middle East.
Okay. So nobody here in the States that you know of?
Yep. That I know of.
Okay. Let me see. And then on that line, are techniques for reversing mind control the same, whether, quote, deculting or other circumstances?
Mind control and culting are different things. Very, very, very different things. So if we're talking about the culting thing, we're talking about strict adherence to a certain set of beliefs, typically following an ideology and almost a hero worship of one leader isolation from friends, isolation from social networks, a new group of terminology that other people don't know, extreme love at the beginning, and then it becomes something called fractionation, where there's lots of love and then punishment or neglect or people turning their backs away from you. So that is way different than mind control. But getting deprogrammed out of a cult is completely different, is a completely different process. I work with a company that helps people get out of cults right now, who's based out of London, and they have a process that's very different to that. But what's interesting is they follow a very similar process to the process of brainwashing. And people hear the word brainwashing, and literally the recipe for brainwashing is a psychological approved therapy called aversion therapy, approved by the American Psychological Association. Guess what? That's the recipe that was discovered for brainwashing when the United States was afraid of our soldiers being brainwashed in Korea to say that they no longer like America, America's a bad country, and they were signing these papers of their own free will. And if you think about the fear factor of that, a person's wife back here in the United States, or back then it was mostly just wives who were left at home. And she not only has to worry about her husband getting killed, but if he does come home, is he a sleeper agent?
Right.
Because he's been brainwashed. So that the fear didn't just play on the troops. If I get captured, I'm going to be brainwashed because of these secret techniques that Koreans have. I'm going to go home and I might kill people back at home. So that was a tremendous, the brainwashing wasn't really that real. They just used some really simple stuff that if I talked about it right now, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's stupid.
What about going further to the Manchurian Candidate concept level?
What about it?
Well, I'm just curious. Is that going down the same path just further? And I think you've talked a few times about wanting to have the opportunity to meet Sirhan.
Yeah, I tried to go meet him in prison. It was 2 days after his final parole hearing, which he got denied for. He's in prison in San Diego, or just outside of San Diego, and it didn't happen. I had everything set up, and it didn't go through. But the splitting a person's personality is something that's been done at least since the early 50s, when it's been done on purpose. And this was done by a guy named Dr. George Estabrooks, who worked with J. Edgar Hoover, another guy named Milton Erickson, Aldous Huxley, Margaret Mead, were all together doing a lot of this stuff. This is at J. Edgar Hoover. And he split,
Ultra, right?
What's that?
Tied in with MK Ultra, right?
It was heavily. And they split the personality of a few Army officers. And I have all of the research on this stuff that has never been released. And they use this stuff to split a personality to where one side of the soldier's personality would carry secrets, and the other side was the normal soldier who was the real human. So then only a code word could activate this alter personality. So they would send him over enemy lines with the secret information. So even if he was captured or tortured, these secrets that he was carrying in his head wouldn't necessarily come out. Then when he gets to the other side or gets to where he's going, the guy on the other side could say, it's a moonlit night, or whatever the code word is, and activate this alter ego. And it's a pretty simple process, actually. And there's even doctors that do it accidentally here in the United States. And there's a condition called iatrogenic dissociative identity disorder, which just means doctor created multiple personality disorder. So a doctor can create multiple personalities on accident without actually meaning to. And that's a whole nother discussion. But
is this similar to, and sorry to interrupt on that, is that similar to the satanic panic and the preschool stuff where, repressed memories are sometimes injected by the doctor accidentally? Or is that just something similar?
It's similar, very similar. But it's always great. You read a lot of this research and you see that most of the doctors who are participating were not evil to begin with. And a lot of them that we don't hear about with the MK Ultra thing backed out, and the government just kind of gave a bunch of dipshits free reign over the realm of psychiatry, who severely violated the Hippocratic Oath, their solemn vow as a healthcare provider, to do no harm.
Well, isn't that kind of a problem with some of these fields? Like, as an example, most cops, for example, are fantastic, generous people that put their life down. I mean, amazing people. However, there is an attraction to the field, and they try to do psychological tests and everything else to help weed them out. And this is not only, just bullies who are sometimes attracted to the field, but even all the way up to a serial killer who tries to inject themselves in the case because they really want to manipulate. So isn't that kind of a potential problem anytime you're dealing with the quote dark arts or whatever?
Absolutely. And you need some training to be able to spot those people. And I think the police are doing all they can for now.
Right. That's why I don't want to criticize them. I'm just saying that that there are people who are really, really trying.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the more clever ones can maybe get in there. Somebody brought up here, and I was going to ask him myself because I've had John Fitzgerald on who helped put him away. Ted Kaczynski was thought of to be part of MK Ultra, the Unabomber.
I've done research on MK Ultra for 15 years. I've never seen his name on a single document. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I've seen research that's never been released to the public, and I've still never seen his name, even casually mentioned in a letter.
Okay, so you've seen the Harvard students that were given the LSD and all that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I know that he was at Harvard at the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean
his name was never on a manifest, or I don't know, whatever they'd call a patient list.
Okay. Let me see. Somebody asked, have you ever read Tom O'Neill's book on Manson and the links with MK Ultra?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I think that's relatively recent. And wow,
anything to do with serial killer stuff, I hate it. I can't stand. Okay. Like this Richard Ramirez guy that we just did on the behavior panel. Yeah. Never heard of him in my life until Scott told us what the topic of the video was. I'd never heard of him.
Well, okay, Scott. Okay, well, let's go back to the panel. Everybody likes to talk about the panel, but Scott loves psychopaths.
Yeah.
That's kind of a little pet thing for him, from what I've seen. What does everybody else like? What do you like?
You mean in terms of diagnostic statistical manual of psychology?
Or just a particular interest. Like, I feel like Scott is very, very interested in psychopaths. That's something that I don't know if it entertains him, but he's very interested in it. I've heard him talk about psychopathy more than any of you. And I just naturally assume that each of you has a particular subject that's interesting to you. You like to count, I hear.
Count?
Yeah, like heartbeats and blink rates. And
yeah, I do a lot of that. I think I'm most passionate about anytime somebody is influenced, persuaded, or made to agree to do something that they otherwise would not do. So false confessions are fascinating to me. The reason that a highly intelligent, highly socially intelligent CEO would join a cult is fascinating to me. And what happened in those scenarios. And I've spent the better part of my life trying to distill all of those extremely enhanced persuasion techniques for military usage. And I didn't realize until just a few years ago that they had some serious therapeutic application. And now I'm starting to teach a whole lot of clinicians and psychotherapy providers in my training.
Okay, you brought up North Korea. Did you read Lifton? Is it coming out of that?
No,
bit?
Never read it.
Okay, Robert Lifton is the guy who, quote, came up with the definition of a cult, I guess, if you will. And he studied North Korean prisoners quite literally. I forgot what it was, his thought reform. I'd have to look it up, but He and Margaret Sanger, I believe, were the big psychologists with a cult side.
Okay, so I've maybe her name appeared first on the research. I've read, I think, almost everything Margaret Singer's put together.
Okay. Yeah, I believe he's actually still alive. He's like 90 something.
Really?
So you better go look him up quickly.
Yeah, I need to give him a call.
All right. So you're into that. Do you ever study Kahneman? Which to me is, I've heard, a cult is really a confidence person who just keeps doing the con on the same people, or conning the same people over and over.
I think there may be maybe a little bit of difference there, but I'm obsessed with Frank Abagnale and
Okay.
the life that he's led. I even have a YouTube video on, touching on Frank Abagnale and discussing the serious benefits of overconfidence and why people who are overly confident have an unfair advantage over other people, like Frank Abagnale did. He walked through the airport with that pilot's uniform on like a badass and had no idea, where the cockpit was basically in an airplane. So overconfidence, you might be a dumbass, but it still gives you an unfair advantage. And I wanted to go through the evolutionary psychology of why that happens and how to do it for yourself in the YouTube video that I did.
Have you met him?
No, I haven't. I'd love to.
Oh, Jordan Harbinger. I know he's had him on, so you might be able to get him.
Yeah, I'll text Jordan.
So seriously, I want to get Frank Abagnale on myself. I think it's a interesting person for certain. On that note of cults, hypnosis, mind control, things like that, I asked you last time we were on if somebody could be hypnotized against their will, and you were kind enough to respond to that. And I also asked Christina Lennon, who I introduced you to, I believe.
Yeah, good friend of mine now.
Oh, well,
good
awesome.
Now.
Awesome. I love connecting really cool people.
I wanted to tell my kids where I was FaceTiming with Christina just a few days ago.
Oh, you
and
should.
I said, I was telling my kids, like, come in here. This is the lady who hypnotized Simon Cowell. And they're like, no. But they got to meet her and they got to meet the dog. It was great. It was fun.
Yeah, well, Princess is retired. I know that. So
yeah.
But yeah, Christina is amazing.
She is.
I had you guys both on because Scott Adams essentially stated that nobody can be hypnotized against their will. And you both contradicted him. Now, what I have not shared, I mean, some of the people who follow the channel and saw it on Twitter may have seen it, but Scott Adams actually did respond to the
to Christina and I.
Yes, to the two of you. And I thought it would be kind of cool if I shared that right now, because I don't think you've actually seen it before.
Awesome.
And he was very cool.
Here's a micro lesson on hypnosis. Not how to do hypnosis, but a specific question that people have been asking me. And the question is this: can you use hypnosis to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do? Now, when I interviewed Nikki Klein, who was involved with the Nexium organization, which the news calls a cult, but that's an opinion, not an objective statement. When I was talking to her, I said during the interview that, in my opinion, you cannot hypnotize people to do things that they don't want to do, meaning that are deeply against their ethical or moral or self-interest. And a lot of people disagreed. And there was a gentleman, Eric Hunley, Hunley. If you want to Google him, he's got a YouTube channel in which he brings up this point, and he talks about the different opinions from a couple of other professional hypnotists who say the opposite. They say, yeah, under the right circumstances, you can hypnotize people to do pretty much anything. Now, why is it that I say you can't, and two other professional hypnotists, even more qualified than me, because they do it professionally, why would they say you can, but I say you can't? Well, the difference is more to do with definitions than with disagreeing about the facts. If you dug into each of the individual facts that the other two hypnotists claim to be true, I will also agree they're true. But we're only differing on definition, and here's the problem. When you tell me, can you make somebody do something they don't want to do with hypnosis, I have limited my definition of hypnosis to a subject and a hypnotist who are trying to do the same thing. In other words, the subject wants to, let's say, conquer a fear, and the hypnotist wants to help them do that. That's your normal subject hypnotist situation. Now, under that situation, by definition, the hypnotist is only doing things that the person wants. They want to get over their fear. So when I call it hypnosis, I mean a willing situation in which the subject and the hypnotist are going for the same objective. So it's more of a definition thing. Now, could the hypnotist plant unwanted suggestions and get somebody to do something that they didn't want to do? Yes, they could. Could somebody who's not a hypnotist use the same tools of persuasion and get somebody to do something that they really didn't want to do? And the answer is yes. In fact, you see that happen every single day. That would be called, let's say, persuasion. Like you prime somebody and then they think they made up their own mind, but they don't know they were primed. That's the thing. It's a book, Persuasion. How about the written by Cialdini? Cialdini also wrote Influence before he wrote Persuasion. Influence is exactly a book about how people are influenced and don't know that they didn't make up their own mind. So you can show that people think they're making up their own mind, but they're actually just influenced. So is that somebody making somebody do something they didn't want to do? How about advertising? How about propaganda? How about the fake news? How about selling? How about marketing? How about negotiating? Every one of those things gets you to do something you didn't want to do. So if you ask me, can you make somebody do something that they didn't want to do with hypnosis? I say, how about just get rid of the word hypnosis? Can you get people to do things they didn't want to do by talking to them or, exposing them to, stimulation? The answer is, yeah, all of these things do it. Advertising does it, marketing, negotiating, all of them. Let me make it even simpler. Let's say you planned to get some work done today and you were going to work hard and today was going to be a real good work day. And your best friend calls you and says, hey, it's a great day. Do you want to golf? And you say, no, I had today was going to be work. I'm not going to golf. I'm going to work. And then your friend is like, it's not going to be this good every day, and you could work tomorrow and that work will still be there. And by the way, you promised me that you would golf with me the next time it was a good day. And then finally you say, all right, let's just go golf. So is that an example of you being hypnotized to go golf instead of work? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. That is an example of you being hypnotized, but you wouldn't call it that. You simply used a tool of hypnosis, which is directly asking for something, maybe comparing it to something else, using the concept of shortage. It's like, there won't be many great days. Reciprocity. I did this favor for you. Why don't you golf with me? You can imagine a whole bunch of techniques of hypnosis, but they're just a conversation. It's just you and your friend talking. Would you ever say that your friend forced you to do something you didn't want to do? Or would you say, no, I did what I want to do. I simply changed my mind about what it was I wanted to do. That's probably how you would filter it. You'd say, no, I did what I want to do. I just changed my mind about what I wanted to do. Or did you? Because you wouldn't have changed your mind without that friend saying and doing the right things. That friend hypnotized you against your will because your will was not to go golfing and you did. So this opens up an interesting question about free will. I would say that as a person who does not believe that free will.
he goes on for a few. I don't know if we wanted to get into all of it. I'll put a link to the rest of the response. He spent almost 10 minutes talking about all of that, which I think is interesting. And I imagine you'd agree with a lot of what he said.
Yeah, I think Scott and I are both board certified clinical hypnotherapists from an international board. I think Scott and I are certified under the same board. But I agree that the definitions are unusual. I think you had one of a super chat question up here from.
I do. Yeah. I was going to get to that next.
But yeah, I agree with that in that you can absolutely be made to do something that you normally wouldn't do. I disagree with Scott that it might be I can make you do something you don't really want to do. If I'm that good at influence, I'll just make you want to do it. And then you'll want to do it. So, I mean, it's not a question of like, oh, I don't want to do this. So then we have context and desire. So I could build something up and drive you towards that behavior. I could use hypnosis to do that. I could drop somebody in the middle of a loud bar completely out in a trance in 3 minutes or 30 seconds many times. But then it's the context. And then you have the super creepy hypnotist guy who was arrested in Seattle, I think, for molesting one of his clients or something
that
like
was actually in the video. I've got the tape where he was doing it and the police literally came in the scene. So I got the police tape and put that in the same video.
That's awesome. I'm glad they did it. But in a context like that, you change the desire plane that person is on. So right now, I don't want to get naked. Neither do you, Eric. Especially
no, and they by the audience, you don't want it. Trust me on this. You don't want that. I'm not tan daddy.
So in most situations, people don't really feel like I need to take my clothes off right now. But if you're under hypnosis and someone tells you that you're in the bathroom, you're getting ready to go get in the shower. So the moral objection of like, this is against my morals to get naked is no longer there. The context has completely shifted what your morals will tolerate in a situation. So I think that's
changing the reality around somebody in essence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that makes total sense. Let's definitely get this question because hopefully you do know somebody. Please recommend a hypnotist if possible in tri-state area for self-development / optimization. Either way, appreciate Chase Hughes education. Now, is tri-state Delmarva? I mean, I don't know which tri-state.
I don't know. Patricia, please send me an email at chase@chasehughes.com.
Perfect. And then, yeah, you could probably look somebody up if you don't know them off the top of your head. Okay, so changing the reality and all that, I think I want to finish out talking to you. All right, what did I miss?
Dragon's Treasure said they want you to get naked.
No, you. Tan Daddy. They want Tan Daddy. They don't want me. They need to buy tea for me. But anyway, what about New York City tri-state area. Duh. There we go. Sorry. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. What do you think? And Scott Adams is starting to spin into that about free will. He's of the belief that we have no free will. I'm wondering where you fall on that spectrum. I know that's a highly debated item. If anybody wants torture, listen to Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris talk about free will for 2 hours.
Free will is a human construct. It's words that we're making up as humans. Free will just means we can make decisions. Yep, then we've got it. So the definition of free will can be different. This could be a 9,000 hour long philosophical debate. But from an anatomical debate, the part of our brain that makes decisions can make its own decisions. We can make up our own minds. We can choose to run a red light. And if we say that there is no free will, then we should let every criminal out of jail because they're not responsible for what they did.
That's kind of
free will.
Where I am. Well, that's kind of where I am. And I feel like your philosophy that you were talking about earlier about making choices for tomorrow, isn't that free will? Isn't that, that discipline, isn't that kind of part of it?
Yeah.
Because if we have no free will, then we just do whatever we want, right now, impulsively.
Which we can. You could
I
just
mean,
randomly choose to subscribe to Eric Hunley's YouTube channel right now, just because you wanted to.
that's right, because you do not have free will. In that instance, everybody, you have no free will. You must subscribe. Chase is a master hypnotist. He went to school. So this is a definite influence. Please subscribe. And actually, on that wonderful note, because I want to keep Chase coming back and we're going to leave some things out there. What are we going to talk about next, Chase?
Anything you guys want to. We could actually dig into how hypnosis works.
Okay.
And some secrets that you won't learn in any hypnosis class ever. And I can even yank someone into the camera next time we come online and show you how fast a person can be hypnotized. How's that?
Perfect. And I will visit the end of this, and we will see you within a month or two, let's hope.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, man.